Tell us so, too. There seems to be another piece to this puzzle, Christian, and that seems to be everyone's focusing on the share market, the stock market. Oh, no, the Dow's crashing, whatever. But the bond market is a very important thing here, too. That this seems to be about an effort to bring down the rate that the federal government has to pay on its treasury notes, which are the way that it keeps itself financed. This seems to be working already and having a real effect on that market. Is really the end game here bringing down that deficit, which literally since I was a small child has been talked about as being this insurmountable thing that America will never get over, and one day for which there will be a reckoning?
Yeah, I don't know if they've intentionally done that. The market was overvalued by almost any traditional means. It was trading at about 30 times earnings, the S&P 500. The historical norm is actually less than 20. If you look at sort of the more recent decades when our economy has been more services and technology focused, still it's high. It's come down a little, but it's also that economy was goosed essentially by Joe Biden by $2 trillion of deficit spending. He basically kept all of the government spending we had during the coronavirus crisis and just kept it after the crisis ended. And so I think that the decline in the market is as much a response and a recognition. Also, artificial intelligence, maybe one day it'll cure cancer and do wonderful things. But so far, I haven't spent $1 on AI. I know some companies have, but it does seem a little bit like the dot-com boom. So that's the market. Now, but you're right, treasuries have come down. We have $29 trillion in debt. Sometimes it's quoted as 36, but the stuff that the U.S. government owes to actual people and institutions is $29 trillion. And you'd think that would be financed long-term, like 30 years, the 30-year bond. But as it turns out, the irresponsible government actually has to refinance that. A lot of it's biased towards short-term debt that's coming up. And if interest rates are running 4, 5, 6%, what we pay now, and we actually now pay more in interest than we do for national defense, would easily go up by 50%, maybe even double in the Trump term. So rates down will help Secretary Bessent, our Treasury Secretary, refinance that loan.
Rita.
You have plenty of debt, 36 trillion, my gosh, but the Democrats, you would think, would be capitalizing in this period of economic turmoil and Trump introducing these policies. But the Democrats in Congress have an approval rating of 21%, Christian. The Democrats in general below 30, I think 27%. Who is going to emerge as the savior for the Democrats? Who is the front runner to lead this party to a position where it's actually electable?
It's really hard to say. The only moderate on the scene is Fetterman, the senator from Pennsylvania, but no one seems to think he has a lot of room to grow just because of some health problems. Other than that, there's Gavin Newsom, the governor of California. He's just as bad as Joe Biden as far as fiscal irresponsibility, woke stuff. They have Tim Walz, the vice presidential candidate, has come back on the scene with a bunch of profanity and saying he's going to fight. Every day that Tampon Tim, which is the nickname he earned by putting tampons in boys' rooms in elementary school. Every day he's on TV is a good day for Republicans. But yeah, it's very interesting. Democrats used to be the party of the working man, and they used to actually favor either tariffs or some sort of efforts to increase manufacturing, and they're just out there saying no, 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 no.
Christian, sorry, I was just, I'm really curious, though, because we've seen this massive elite freakout about what Trump is doing here and about globalization. I've just been sent a story here that Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of Britain, is about to announce that globalization is basically over, the era is over, because people don't see the benefits. So is this an interesting sort of data point that Donald Trump may offend the sort of the chattering class, as we call them down here, and yet he is on the money with where most people are when it comes to saying, you know what, that slightly cheaper television is great, but I'd rather have the job and the dignity.
I think so, yeah. It's a fundamental turning point. It's big of a turning point. If you look at some of the big changes in America, the Reagan reforms, which took place in the early 1980s, or the advent of technology, sort of a computer on every desk that happened in the early 1990s, the commercialization of the internet in the early 2000s. I think we're at that point. And you're right, politically, Starmer, it's great he's coming around. His party, of course, isn't coming around because all of Europe, Western Europe, not maybe not Hungary, but a lot of it. First of all, they don't let people decide who are going to vote for. I mean, go try and vote for Marine Le Pen. You can't do that. Try and vote for having controlled borders. That's politically incorrect. It's non-woke, and the elite won't have you do it. So it's great that Steinmeier said that. Maybe he's gotten some religion, but I'll have to see it to believe it.
Now, Christian, I want to ask you about free speech. J.D. Vance has made a big thing about that as regards particularly Britain. And he's mentioned before with NATO that it's a key thing, that America doesn't see why it should defend other nations if they don't share the same values. Here in Australia, we're embarking on some pretty severe restrictions on free speech on both sides of politics. Now, you mentioned our 10% tariff. That's actually our GST, our consumption tax, our VAT. That applies to everything across the board, so we can't withdraw it from American goods. So what can we trade with America to get rid of those 10% tariffs? Should we be looking at restoring free speech, for example?
Well, I think certainly that would be helpful. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see if Trump. He said that Vietnam had offered something and it was going to be a big deal. They face very high tariffs as of April 2nd, and so do those come down? Does any country get out of the 10% tariff, or is that just something that everyone faces? We don't know. I think it's important to differentiate Australia. During COVID, I think a lot of Americans noticed that lockdowns, varied across the United States from severe to less severe, and we're a little surprised that Australia seemed pretty severe under what was nominally a liberal government. But, contrast that to Western Europe. I think people would see that the United States has a lot more in common values-wise with Australia. I know you have an election coming up, so it'll be interesting to see how that happens. But when you look at the terminal decay of Western Europe and in NATO and things like that, I think the Pacific is a different story. And people think of it economically as the future. It's where the biggest threats come from, China, but also the biggest economic opportunities for growth. And also, you were talking earlier on the program about net zero, just being a great producer of coal and iron ore and other minerals. The fact that I think Australia, probably easier than Germany, Britain, France, can dispense with that sort of nonsense, that sort of civic religion of climate change alarmism, could endear the country to a lot of people.
Oh, well,
absolutely.
It could endear it, but we would actually
endear
have
it to the people of Australia for a start.
Well, if only we had politicians who are actually advocating for that position. But one of the key issues for the election, and something that seems to no longer be an issue at all, Christian, is illegal immigration in America. I saw some figures for March, just record lows. How did the illegal immigration crisis, this thing that we were told was almost unsolvable, get solved in a matter of weeks?
Yeah, it's amazing just what intent will do and how quickly words spread. When people hear by word of mouth, all you have to do is show up, go cross through Mexico, they'll let you right through, and just show up and say you're a refugee. You have a well-founded fear of persecution. Now, if you're the head of the Venezuelan opposition, then yeah, you qualify for that. But if you're just someone who wants a better life, and I understand that, I'd probably try and be sneaking somewhere else if I were them too. But anyway, just the fact that they can be turned away, that they may be forced to remain in Mexico, and that the apex criminals among them are going to be sent to some very unpleasant prisons in Central America. We won't even just bother with putting them on trial here, just deport them. Word gets around pretty quickly. So even without building a wall, just the idea that you're going to enforce some of the laws on the books, and it just shows that Biden could have done this if he wanted to. He said he needed more money and more laws, but he didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Christian Whiton, always great to chat to you. Thanks so much for coming on Outsiders. It'll be fascinating to see what happens over the next few weeks.
Thank you. My pleasure.
With the tariffs, etc.